Hey guys, welcome to this new class for FX PhD. So tonight for this art102 class, we're going to talk about the color harmony. So the color harmony is a very interesting topic when we want to talk about art and photography and matte painting for us, obviously, because it's going to be about how the colors are talking to each other and how we can play with some rules again. So the color harmony, basically what it is how we can mix color together so they can interact in a nice way. If you just randomly put colors all together without trying to following any kind of rule, you might end up with something which is gonna not necessarily look very harmonious. So as we have some rules that we explained about the composition, we also have some rules about the colors. And the basic is the base of the color harmony is the color wheel. So the color wheel is this element here for its simplest version, which is about going through all the spectrum of the different colors. And in this one that I showed you here, I don't have the hue or the saturation of it. You can find different sort of color wheel, and even in Photoshop here you can see how the colors are reacting, and you can find them, in some sort of a wheel as well. So you go through the whole spectrum of color which is here, but it's all about how you're gonna put them together. So in Photoshop here, it's in a square, and you can see like where the saturation and intensity here. So it's gonna be from the very intense color in the dark version of it. So it's going to be like the brightness, if you want, of this color, and here is going to be the saturation. So you're going to go into the gray and the black here, the white there, because you're going to lose the saturation of the color. So you can imagine this as the wheel of the color, but on top of that, you also can play with the saturation of it, or the brightness of the color. The intensity. Now it's about how you're going to put the colors together, and these are representing the most important schemes when it's about putting colors together. And what I'm going to do today is going through all these different schemes and show you some example coming either from photograph, comic books, or even posters for films, or this sort of thing. So as you can see here, the dot is going to represent the different colors that we are using for this specific scheme. So monochromatic, obviously, we're just going to use one color. Complementary, we're going to use two colors that are opposites on the wheel. Analogous, we're going to use some colors which are right next to each other on the wheel. Split complementary is like having one complementary, so that's the same as this one, except that instead of picking the one which is right on the opposite side of the first color here, you're going to go for opening a little bit and take two colors which are going to be around the color which would be the complementary. Triadic is when you have three colors disposed as a triangle. And then dyad is a little bit like analogous without the one in the middle, so we're not going to represent that one. Square and tetradic rectangle is kind of following the same sort of rule. It's four colors on the wheels, square being equally distant to each other, where the rectangle is a bit more close on two sides. So let's have a look at this and analyze a little bit of the different image. I'm just going to leave the wheel here so we can always go back to it. So the first one here is the monochromatic one. And if I zoom in a little bit, that is typically a monochromatic image, because if you look at it, even if you have some variation in the intensity from very bright to very dark, everything is actually orange. So you are using one color. It's just that you create some variation in the intensity of the color. So it's going to be from the very dark orange, which is going to be black, until a very bright orange, which is going to be kind of yellow because of the highlight, or even white here because of the cushion of the bed. But primarily the color that you're using here is just your orange. And it's really interesting to play with monochromatic image, because it's a little bit like playing in black and white. It's all about the values, the intensity, the brightness, if you want the value. But you have a tint, so you have a color here. So this one is orange. You can play blue, we can play green, we can do a lot of different monochromatic variation, obviously, around the wheel, and it's gonna really give you something really interesting. Obviously, the orange here gives you the sensation of, like, heat, and it's very sunny, it's really warm. If you were playing with blue, that would be way more cooler. So you can really tell different stories, but monochromatic is the base of the colors. And it's actually really interesting to see how that works. Obviously, this is also the less complicated. If I move to complementary, which is the second one that I have here, where typically the complementary of green would be purple. And this is why the Hulk, for example, is green with a purple trousers, because it just fits together. It's just nice to the eye to use the complementary. That could have been orange and blue. That could have been this sort of orange with this sort of blue, yellow with kind of violet bluish. No, in this one we are going for the green, this green here, to the purple there. So the only difference that you see here is probably the saturation, but again, the saturation is about having this dot coming back more in the center, if you consider that it's a bit desaturated in the center of the wheel. And actually, sometimes you'll see that when you have, especially for the split complementary or for the tetradic rectangle that we're going to talk about later, sometimes it can be interesting to actually gather the dots a bit more in the center, because you could have some difficulty to have very saturated color working together, like talking to each other. But as soon as you actually desaturate them a little bit, or bringing the intensity, the brightness a bit lower, then it starts to talk to each other a bit better. So that's also something that you can play with. In this case here, you can see that this purple is a little bit desaturated, just because otherwise that could give you something a bit strange. And if I actually bring the saturation up, you see that suddenly you are matching completely the type of purple that we have here with the type of green that we have here. It's just that the image itself seems very aggressive. It's really saturated and very aggressive. Actually, it works better when you desaturate it a little bit. So color wheels, yeah, color harmony. But don't forget that when you mix the colors together to try to tell a story and make them speak to each other, it's not just about the hue of the color, it's also about the lightness and the saturation, if we use the terminology from the USAT node in Photoshop. Another example is this photograph from Eggstone, which is a very famous photograph to illustrate what would be a complementary photograph. So obviously, we don't want to be completely perfect all the time, which is why you're going to have a little bit of a variation on the red, but roughly this image is all about having red and green, which is exactly this one here that we have in our color wheel. A bit of white and a bit of dark, but we're talking about humans, and so hair, and here we've got like the cigarette. So it could potentially be like a very high lightness of the green or the red here, but mainly, and yes, you could say that you have a little bit of orange, but mainly this image is all about the complementary between the green of the seats here and the red in the back for the bricks, or the table, or the menu here, or even on the dress, or the tone of the skin. So that works pretty well. We are in a complementary approach here. After the complementary, which I'm going to put back here to follow the scheme here, we have the analogous. So the analogous is when you have three tones right next to each other. So one very obvious, this one is a very good example of analogous. If you follow the wheel here, you can see that here we're using the yellow from this section of Godzilla. Let me zoom in a bit. That's a bit much. Like that. So here we've got the yellow in this section here that you have here, and then you have the orange, and you go into something which would be like, if you bring the saturation of these, that we would be around here basically of the analogous wheel. You have the title, which is in red, and then you have different variation from the orange to the yellow. So you have, and of course we have still some intensity here with the clouds, which are quite dark, but mainly here the only colors that you're going to have in this image are yellow, orange, and red. Red being in the title and in this smoke effects coming from the guys jumping So that's typically an analogous poster in terms of color harmony. They went for 3 colors or 4 colors here, maybe with the title, if you consider the title as different, really right next to each other on the color wheel. So that's quite interesting. We have another example here, which is Adult World, another film, which again is completely following that sort of here, because we are right there. So we have the purple and then we go into the blue. So you see different sort of, obviously this purple, this blue here, and this blue there. So we are following this continuous colors on the color wheel, hence analogous. So this is one example where we actually really stay close to each other. So far we've done one color is monochromatic, then we have 2 colors really opposite to each other, which is the complementary. And then we've done the 3 colors or 4 colors right next to each other, which are gonna be the analogous. Now we're gonna start to open a little bit this color harmony situation with the split complementary. So the split complementary is interesting because it's like complementary, except that you're gonna open one color, the opposite color, into 2. So you're gonna take 2 colors around. So if I take this photograph here, you're gonna see that you have, if you start with the blue here and you take the opposite, you have orange here and you have red here. And you kind of forget the saturated orange. This is exactly what you have here. We've got the blue, and then you have the orange through that, and we have the red through this, the lights from the car. So just because we bring these lights of the car here, instead of being in something which would not be very complementary, we have a split complementary, because this orange is too yellow to be the direct opposite of my blue sky, and this red is also too red to be the opposite of the orange. Plus you have 2 different values for the orange between this sort of orange here and the red that we have there. So we are in a situation of split complementary, just because we have that small red here and this orange in these 2 sections. So that is what we call split complementary. So that is quite a cool things to play with as well when we start to work on color harmony, because it really creates something a bit more interesting than just a straight complementary, but also stays in the same sort of things. So that's the split complementary, which I'm going to put back here. Now we are entering into the triadic. So the triadic is like a triangle, and this is where I've got as many examples as all of that. Hang on, let's start with, actually, this one is a very interesting triadic. So triadic compared to split complementary, which is really one opposite and you open, the triadic is more open. So in that case here, if you look at my color wheel here for the triadic, in case of Superman, you have blue, red, yellow. It's not blue and a little bit of orange and a bit of kind of yellowish orange. No, it's clear blue, clear red, and clear yellow. So you are in a triadic color scheme here because of how wide these dots are to, on the wheel. How they're not like just surrounding one color, they are opening one more case. As you can see here, it's a triangle. So Superman costume, especially with the blue, the red, and the yellow, is following a pure triadic scheme. So obviously here then we just add a bit of skin tone and dark hair, but apart from that, and you see that a lot of illustration around Superman or even on the poster for the film are really following this triadic approach, because the suit, Superman's suit, is clearly a triadic one. If you take this photo, you have the same sort of things. You have red, yellow, and something that could be blue desaturated, but it is, if I saturated that, it's going to bring the blue back, and we are clearly into a triadic approach. It's actually the same blue than the one that you have in Superman costume, except that it's a bit less saturated, because as I told you, if I was like this, that would be a bit much. By desaturating it, colors are talking to each other a bit better, because I just, center my dots a bit more here. But fundamentally, we are exactly in the same universe here. This is a triadic photograph from Saul Leiter, who is really good at it. He's done a few like that. If you take this one, that's the same. That could have been like, if you look at here, between the yellow going to the red, that could have been an analogous picture here, actually. We're really close to that, but no, actually it's a triadic because of this here. Because right there, you have some blue that automatically add one dot here, which means that you have now the red, the yellow, and the blue. Again, that's the Superman one. But these three colors are actually working together really well, which is why you're going to see them a lot. If you take this photo here, it's a very nice picture. And these dots, blue here, and this point here, like a bit of blue and a bit of this reflection here, or even a little bit in the glass here, really change a lot of things, because if that was red or yellow, that would be like more like an analogous type of thing. So these few dots of color, which does not have to be like, the amount of color that you use is not very important. You don't want to have them used, in the same quantity across your image. It's a little bit like the yin and yang, the symbol when you have like a little bit of white in the middle of the dark and black, and a little bit of black in the middle of the white, the yin yang. It's a little bit like this. You don't want to have 3 times the same amount of colors. It's actually better to have one principle here, which clearly is the red in terms of, how much you see it, and a little bit of yellow here, and a tiny bit of blue. So don't use the same quantity of each. That would be a bit weird. It's not because you have a triangle that it means that you need to use all the colors at the same level. And finally, this one, again from Saul Leiter, again follow exactly the same principle of a pure triadic with the orange, the blue, and the yellow here. So that's quite interesting to see different case. And I deliberately chosen these different images because they are pretty much all based on the same. They are all based on the same triad: the blue, the orange, and the red and the yellow. It's just the intensity or the saturation which is going to vary from one example to another example. But fundamentally, we are talking about the same. Obviously, we could use different triangles. We don't have to always be in the yellow, red, blue. But you can rotate your triangle all around the color wheel here, and that would give you different cases that are quite interesting. Actually, if I do that, and if I change the hue, that's what I'm going to do here. And you see, it's quite interesting to see this, triad moving around, because that's what it does when you do that. I'm just shifting everything. But fundamentally, you're always going to have 3 colors working together. So that is the triadic. And one more than the triadic is going to be the tetradic, or the square. Let's just consider that they are kind of the same, but with different, repartition. The square being exactly the same, and the rectangle being a little bit narrow here and there. So if you take this poster from inside out, actually it's quite easy because it's even represented here. If you consider that the blue and the green are roughly in the same because they are roughly here, then you have yellow, and then you have purple, and then you have red. So yellow, red, orange, purple, blue, green. So you have this tetradic, or the rectangle approach on that, as you would have it in this image, by having a blue, green, red, orange. So blue, green, orange, and red. So that would be probably more like this one is a bit more like a it's actually following quite nicely this one. So it's a rectangle, where the other one would be a bit more like a square. But you see, we have 4 colors now working together, mainly the blue, the green, the red, and a little bit of orange. In that case, that would be pretty much the same. So it's probably the most complex because you start to bring a lot of different colors, but even here, you're still following some rules, and it's really interesting to not, place colors randomly without thinking about it. It's really interesting to know these rules because obviously when we're going to choose, the color of an element that you're going to paint in your image, or how you're going to grade something to compose your frame, or even if you do some texture on an asset because you want it to be part of the image, it's really interesting to think about how the colors are going to work. And that's something which I think is really important, because if you just take some source images coming from different source and then you just grade them roughly and you put them together, you're going to end up probably with something which is going to be a bit like overcomplicated with a lot of different colors, where you'd be better to have an understanding. So that is exactly what is going to give you like the tone of the film. If you look at some film, like, I don't know, very stylized film where you have a few colors, like The Matrix, for example, is really green. Amelie is really about complementary colors. You're going to have a lot of red and green in the way it's being graded. You're going to have, like, this photo would be perfect in a film from the 60s, because that also follows a complementary approach, which is simple. This looks a bit more like, the 70s, when you have like, this sort of vibe. You can really tell a story by trying to put things together in a harmonious way. If you just put things together without thinking about how the colors are going to talk to each other, the saturation of each colors, if you have one being predominant on the other, how much you want of the other to counterbalance the first one, your image is not going to feel really harmonious. So as you had the rule of composition, which again, by the way, here is absolutely perfect because this character is really following the rule of thirds. It's really nice photo. You and this line as well is in. I mean, that's perfect. You want to follow the rules either both for the composition but also for the colors. That's what I mean. I'm trying to say the colors are completely part of the composition, and lighting obviously is as well, as we've said the other day in the other class, or through the rule of the contrasts, for example, which implies a lot of lighting research. Everything works together. Composition, colors, lights are extremely important and work together. Saturation, how much you're going to saturate your image to have something looking nice. If I take this photo and I saturate it more, I'm going to lose the perception of it, because suddenly it's going to look too much. I'm losing it. Now I'm back to something where the colors are talking to each other better. So that's exactly what I want to do. Here, it's already quite extreme in terms of saturation, but if I was diminishing it, maybe that would be a bit softer. If I increase it, then we're like, oh no, we can't believe that anymore. So saturation, how much you put in, is really interesting. This image here is not that saturated. Now it's becoming way more saturated and starts to not feel as good as it was. So that's it really. That's what I wanted to show you, the different way to mix colors and to have them talking to each other. And I'm really insisting on the fact that I said talking to each other, because that's how it works. Like, you put colors together right next to each other to influence themselves and to create something together. So it's all about how the relationship between the color is going to be. And to do that, it's important to follow some rules, which are, again, here: monochromatic, complementary, analogous, split complementary, triadic, tetradic, and work on the intensity and the values of the colors. So it's really nice. Thanks to Expert Photography for the color schemes, the color wheels here. And please take a camera, take your phone, go outside and try to take some photos by thinking about this. So try to give you like an exercise. I'm going to take today a photo which is going to represent the split commentary color scheme, or the analogous color scheme, which is really easy to do in a garden, by the way, or complementary, or and try to give you some exercise like this. And you see that it's really interesting to actually think about the colors while you're taking a photo, and it's going to help you to become a better painter if you want to do matte painting, or if you want to do some texturing or even lighting, because it's going to give you some tools to create some harmony with your different colors. So that's it, guys. That was color harmony. And I'm really looking forward to seeing some of the photo that you could put online following this sort of example. Thank you very much for listening, and see you soon. Bye-bye.